Welcome to today's training. We're starting the series called the Four Core Metabolic Cellular Healing Stack. And what's unique, this is going to be on MPG's four core products I'm going to talk about during these training. I will separate each one of these into each individual product. And at the end, we're going to talk about all the effect this has on the vagal nerve or the vagus nerve and the vagal system. So what I want us to understand is that each one of these four products, they are very powerful on their own. They are standalone, and they'll do some very unique things in the human body. But when we put them together, they are transformational. And that's what excites me as I'm kind of going through all this stuff I'm putting together here for us. So with that, we're going to start with the very first product, and that product is pHix. And for me, I say that this is the bitter to better blueprint. I believe that this is the very first one we need to be considering, because to me, when you actually put this into the mouth and it turns on all the bitter receptors, whether you put it directly in the mouth or whether you put it in your drink, although I do prefer it to be in a drink, it opens up the bitter sensors, opens up the bitter receptors, goes to the vagus nerve, and all of a sudden, all these things are turned on. And I've expressed this in a way in the past that this is actually the first domino, if you will, in a line of dominoes to actually start initiating or activating the entire pathway. So let's go into and understand some of the benefits of pHix. I put together what I call my ultimate list of pHix benefits. And I want us to understand this is not a stimulant at all. It's not a fad at all. It's just deep functional science-based or science-backed activation. And that's what I have found in all the research I've gone through this. So the first thing we'll talk about are the metabolic benefits. So the first thing that this metabolic benefit is going to do is going to activate the brown fat thermogenesis, or what we call the thermogenic reaction. And when it takes the brown adipose tissue, the BAT, it's going to burn the calories, or the white adipose tissue of the visceral fat. It's going to generate heat, and then it's also going to generate energy. And this is very similar, like if you have a cold exposure, if you go out in the cold without a coat and you're kind of shivering at your core. Or if you do some type of high intensity interval type of a training, you're going to feel that heat generated in the core of the body. The result of it is that the more metabolic activity it does or creates, it'll be around that viscera, or specifically around the abdomen and the organs. And that component is what we call the visceral adipose tissue. So this does reduce the visceral adipose tissue, or the visceral fat, which is all around the core organs, if you will, inside the body itself. And this viscera, once it becomes rancid or toxic, it's the most dangerous type of fat that we carry in our body. The research of human trials shows statistically significant reductions in visceral adiposity and the total fat area somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks. In fact, the research shows about 60 to 65% of people, it will take between 8 to 12 weeks before we see a measured difference within the visceral adipose tissue or the girth measurements. It also improves fat oxidation and lipid metabolism. So when we say that it enhances mitochondrial efficiency, what that really means is it produces more energy through the mitochondria, or ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And what that does is it allows us to have more fuel to do a lot more things, whether it's now energy, whether it's supply energy, whether it's repair energy. And it does this through the beta oxidation pathways that breaks down like the oxidized LDL or the rancid free fatty acids. And the next thing it does that's really unique is it shifts the body from putting fat or storing fat, and it actually goes into the fat burning mode. So that's a critical benefit for pHix and how it actually does that. Continuing on these benefits, it improves insulin sensitivity, and it enhances what we call the glucose uptake by the tissue of the cells, meaning it gets more glucose out of the blood, and therefore reduces insulin resistance. And you're going to find a lot of these products do that in a unique way from a different angle, if you will, or different pathway or different system. It also helps stabilize the blood sugar and avoid reactive hypoglycemia. It reduces post-meal glucose spikes. Right, bitter acids that are in pHix actually modulate the GLP-1, which is, most of us have heard of that in some of the drugs that are out there on the advertising that's going on. But what it really does, it calms down and smooths down that glycemic curve after the meals so that you're not hungry again. All right. It suppresses cravings and hunger signals. It acts on a unique hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is what we call the expansion hormone, meaning that when your fat cells are becoming full, it'll come in here and expand it 1, 2, or 3 times. And that's a huge number. And most of the times that's happening, leptin is turned off. And leptin is the satiety hormone, where it tells us when we're full. And so since it acts on both the ghrelin, shutting that off and turning leptin back on, it hits what we call the vagal hypothalamic circuit. And this is what I call the feedback loop mechanism of the vagus nerve or the vagal system. And that gets the communication back to the brain, says, hey, we're full. You can stop eating. We have plenty of raw material in the stomach that we can break down and use for energy. Next category is the neurocognitive and mood support. And here we talk about how pHix actually boosts the cognitive performance. Now, this is really kind of critical in a lot of ways because the trials have showed that the improvements in memory and processing speed and attention span in older adults actually starts improving, right? We see the brain inflammation reduce. The pHix actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and it calms what are called the glial cells or microglial cells and activation, that nuclear factor kappa beta inhibition. And here's the way I try to describe this is when we have a lot of debris that's inside there, a lot of inflammation inside the brain, it's hard for the signal to get from one point to the other and have recollection, have recall, have good cognition. And most people just call that brain fog. And what we see is that this actually comes in and cleans that phase up. So you reduce the inflammation that's going on in the brain. And it also increases what we call the BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that tells us that it goes into what we call brain neuroplasticity or the neurogenesis, which means you actually are creating new cells. And every time that you clean stuff up, so your body's not having to deal with all the toxins that's in there, it can now work on cleaning, actually repairing cells and building new cells, which that increases the learning and it also increases our long-term mental resilience. Next factor we talk about that calms the amygdala and the stress circuit. So pHix helps reduce fear-based reactivity and improve stress adaptability. What does that mean? That means that the more toxins that we have in the brain, the more reactive it is, and it's reactive to simpler things that are stress indicators instead of major things. And so people that have this condition tend to be in fear a lot. And what this does, it just calms all that process down so we're not in such a stressed out mood. It improves mood and reduces irritability, so it decreases the beta endorphin spikes. It promotes the vagal parasympathetic tone. We'll be talking about that later. But that leads to just reducing the emotional aspect that things just seem to be so blown out of case. A lot of times that's called the dramatic effect or the drama effect. And it helps to bring that back in and just calm everybody down. It lowers anxiety without sedation. It does not act like a benzo or SSRI, right, which regulates from the bottom up via the gut-brain signaling. This actually just reduces the toxin inside the brain and calms that whole process down. It's anti-inflammatory and immune modulation, so it lowers CRP, C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and other cytokines. Bitter acids suppress that systemic inflammatory messengers at the genetic expression level. What does all that mean? That means once the fire kind of gets turned on, it starts speeding up and we never get it shut back down. And what pHix does, it comes in and helps us reduce or lower that and reduce it and then eventually put the fire out so it doesn't keep going. It reduces oxidized LDL, low density lipoprotein, and rancid fatty acid effects. So the antioxidant support helps repair the endothelium, which is along our arterioles and our venule lining, and reduces cardiovascular risk. It restores that endothelial function. It actually puts it back in, improves nitric oxide balance. And nitric oxide is what we need to go in and out of every single cell, in and out of the blood, in and out of the veins. Everything has to happen via the nitric oxide. And so this increases or improves blood flow and then the vascular compliance. It balances Th1, which is T helper cells 1, 2, and 17, which are part of the immune processes. It supports autoimmunity balance. It dampens the chronic immune hyperactivity. And then it inhibits mast cell activation and histamine overload. This is a critical thing. And those who have this mast cell syndrome or MCAS, they know what it does. They'll eat certain foods and it just triggers a lot of histamine reactions. They break out the hives and they just sweat. And they have all kinds of problems that are pretty extensive in the body. pHix also helps the digestive and gut health benefits. So it stimulates digestive enzyme secretion. It activates better taste receptors in the mouth, as we talked about, and then to the gut, releases bile, the amylase, and the lipase. It improves gastric motility and bloating. It enhances peristalsis via the vagus nerve, and it actually helps the bitter reflex pathways. And what this is going to do is when you take that in there, It's going to stop the things flowing through, and it's going to break it all down. And once it doesn't find any poison, it's going to open up and let that go through. And this is probably one of the first times that people have gotten rid of the gassy bloating area that's going on there. It's also one of those things that we're increasing motility. We're getting the flow to go through there. And the other factor is we're probably digesting so much food that we've not digested in years or since we were kids. And this is why people can get a lot more energy out of a lot less food. It reduces leaky gut and gut-derived inflammation, so it tightens the tight junctions and lowers the lipopolysaccharides and the endotoxin translocation. What does all that mean, Ben? What this means is that it's going to fix the leaky gut, or what we call the zonulinosis problem, where things are separating and stuff is able to come through. We talk about in functional medicine, the first thing we got to do is we got to seal the gut so that we can heal the gut. And that's exactly what this is doing. It's coming in to seal the gut up. Then it balances the microbiome diversity. We'll talk about this a couple different times, but indirectly supports short chain fatty acid production, especially butyrates. And butyrates is one of the key factors of gamma aminobutyric acid, which is one of the 8 master neurotransmitters. And that happens right in the stomach to the duodenum. And that's where the short chain fatty acid is supposed to be broken down. So this actually increases and improves that pathway. And it may reduce candida and gut dysbiosis. It creates an unfavorable terrain for the pathogens through improved bile acid signaling and the gut pH, meaning these bitter acids come in and destroy their bedding. They destroy the wall that they're hiding behind. And now all of a sudden they're exposed to the acids. They're exposed to the natural fighting ability of the body, right? What we call the innate ability of the immune system. They have been hidden, and now it exposes it and shows them out. And now the body can go and do what it's supposed to do. So the benefits of cardiovascular detoxification, so it lowers triglycerides and improves lipid profile. It can reduce low density lipoprotein oxidation and promote the healthy HDL levels, right? Which is what we need. The high density lipoproteins, HDL, they're needed to bring everything back into shape, right? And their job is to go through and clean up the toxins that are in the arterial walls as well, any other debris that's left around. It supports liver detox, phase 1 and phase 2 enzymes, enhances glutathione, which is a master antioxidant related to detox capacity and bile flow. It improves the kidney and lymphatic drainage. So through the vagus parasympathetic activation, it supports diuresis and intestinal detox, interstitial detox, meaning that the space between things where a lot of things can hide is going to go through and kind of clean that up and get that whole process to clean out of the body. So once again, you're not spending so much energy on the dysfunction of the body, but now you have more energy to actually fix things and repair things and create more energy. It assists in blood pressure regulation by balancing the parasympathetic sympathetic tone, right? It governs that vascular resistance, meaning it's the essence of the brain to the nerves and to the heart and to the lungs and then to the kidney to determine how much blood pressure is there against what we call the resistance of the capillary beds. And by cleaning all this up, now all of a sudden there's less demand load, which means there has to be less cardiac output, which means the pressure or which the rate which the heart is pumping can actually reduce. Okay, so vagus nerve and parasympathetic restoration, we'll talk about this another time, but it enhances the vagal tone, all right, which increases heart rate variability, and that is a sign of parasympathetic dominance and stress resilience. So by cleaning that up, all of a sudden, we're back into a healthy, calming, repairing mode, and stress doesn't have the effect on it like it normally does, right, whether it's panic attacks or those kind of things. It improves stress recovery, sleep quality, so it calms down the nervous system. It improves cortisol rhythms, and it actually promotes that deeper restorative sleep. It improves breathing patterns and oxygen uptake. It actually fixes the problem that we talk about is on the inhibiting component where we can't get enough air in because too much air hasn't got out, right? And so we hit that resistance pattern and we blow through that, and now we get the toxins out. We're able to get more air in. So it encourages diaphragmatic-based respiration via the brainstem and the feedback loop mechanisms through the vagal nerve. And then it amplifies that mind-body awareness and emotional resilience. So what this really does, it helps people become more attuned, less reactive in a stress-reactive environment, and they're more centered under pressure. They're just calm. It's like all those signals aren't being triggered that cause a deep reaction. Some of the other functional benefits that we see, it reduces water retention and puffiness, right? By supporting lymphatic flow and the mineral balance, it cleans that up, gets that moving, helps regulate hormonal fluctuations, there we go, which supports insulin, cortisol, estrogen pathways, and may even benefit perimenopausal symptoms. It enhances physical endurance and mitochondrial energy, meaning we increase what's called NAD and ATP conversion, supports oxygen use, and reduces fatigue. And it speeds up recovery after illness, traveling, or overeating. It rapidly recalibrates the internal homeostasis. And I want to point out this because I get a lot of these questions. There's no estrogenic activity, right? Unlike whole hops extracts, pHix is non-feminizing, meaning there's no phytoestrogenic effect to it at all, and it does not upregulate the estrogen receptors. So a couple of little bonus advantages here let's talk about real quick. First of all, it's gluten-free, caffeine-free, alcohol-free. There is no jitteriness or crash upon taking the supplementation, this nutraceutical. It's compatible with any type of diet, any type of medication, anything that's going on out there that you want to do. It's backed by peer-reviewed human clinical trials. It's safe for long-term use with slow, steady gains. The longer you take it, the better your body becomes or better it gets. And the beauty of it can be combined with FIT, we'll talk about, Immune-5, the other, and NZ-fulvic acid, the other ones we're going to actually talk about. So the core 5 pHix pathways I like to look at. So the metabolic pathway, it affects fat burning and satiety. The cognitive pathway enhances brain performance and mood alteration. Inflammatory pathway, it reduces all systemic inflammation. The digestive pathway improves digestion and nutrient uptake. And the nervous system, it boosts the vagal tone and stress resilience. And I think those are the main things everybody would like to have as we're kind of going through this current life state, a cycle, everybody's dealing with. And this is the big factors of what pHix actually does. So here are my top 4 benefits after doing hundreds of hours of research and actually putting all this together. So number 1, it helps you identify and reduce inflammation in the body by metabolizing the oxidized low-density lipoproteins, or the ox-LDL. Number 2, it helps to clean up or clean out the 4 detoxification pathways for excretion. And that means in the lungs, you can breathe out those toxins. You get rid of that entrapment syndrome. Number 2, it improves the skin. You're going to be sweating out the toxins. Number 3, it increases the urine by peeing out the toxins. And number 4, it increases the defecation by pooping out the toxins. Now, if you just hear those 4 things, I want you to understand that when a person first starts on pHix, and you've heard me talk about that this is the flush that has to happen. Eventually, it's going to blow all those pathways out so where the motility or flotility of getting rid of toxins is easy to do. And most people have blockages in those right now. The average person we've seen, it takes about anywhere from 3 to 10 days to most generally to clean out, flush that out, which means that there's going to be a time after about a week to 10 days, you're going to be able to breathe a lot easier. You may have different toxins in your breath coming out. You may have stinky breath. You may have bad morning breath. Your skin may sweat. You may be actually pushing things that we call it's in the interstitial pathway, meaning right under the skin. And as it brings those out, they may be little spots or pocks or little rashes or breaks out. You may increase your sweating. In fact, you will increase that, but it's not going to be like a hot flash most women experience or men do when they're working out. It's actually just a gradual release of all these things out through the skin. And the urine, there's going to be a time frame. It's going to be, the term we say is odoriferous. That is, you're peeing out these toxins. It's going to be pretty rank or pretty stinky. But once that flush gets flowing and you get those plugs blown out, all that stuff, the smell's changing. And the same with the defecation. The poop's going to change. We call the fecal makeup is going to change. And all of a sudden, once that starts flowing, we're seeing a ton of people have a lot better bowel movements and people that had a lot of problems. So the third thing that I want to talk about, it's the dynamic effect, what's called cellular apoptosis of the adaptogenic and morphogenic precancer cells. And for me, that's enough reason just for the rest of my life, having had cancer twice, is to make sure that I'm taking this. And I take a couple other different cancer antigens, if you want to call them that actually help do this. And this is one of the key factors that I have found in the entirety of all the research I've done. And I think since, we look at some of these components that cancer is the number 1 killer in North America, this in and of itself is a key factor for our consideration for a very long time to take it. The number 4 is the thermogenic activation via the brown adipose tissue to burn the white fat. So I want you to kind of just take all this in and understand, when do we see all these things? Well, having had people on the product for 11 months now, we're seeing a lot of these things start showing up somewhere 8 to 12 weeks into it. And then the longer they go, the more we've seen. If you don't have the list of those top 20, 25, 30 things that we have seen, we'll get you that list. So with that, I'm going to close off on this one and get ready for the second one. So God bless.